sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so you wanted like really get a grip on this whole spring equinox thing coming up in 2025. Well, you've come to the right place because we're going to do a deep dive specifically for you on that.
Yeah.
And to help guide us, we've got this awesome article from Forbes called Spring Equinox 2025, Everything You Need to Know. It's by Jamie Carter.
Great writer.
Yeah, he's fantastic. An award-winning science reporter. And he really knows how to break down what's going on in the sky, so we're definitely in good hands here.
Yeah.
So basically what we're aiming to do is like pull out all the essential details about this equinox, when it's happening, the astronomical meaning behind it, and then some cool stuff that's connected to it.
Right.
You know, things like the Northern Lights.
Exactly.
So let's just dive right in. First things first. When exactly should we be circling on our calendars for this spring equinox in 2025?
Well, according to Carter, it's going down on Thursday, March 20th. And get this, at precisely 09:01 Coordinated Universal Time.
9:01 UTC, got it. But okay, for those of us who are, living and breathing here in North America, what does that actually look like in our local time zones? Because that's what we're really going to be paying attention to, right?
Absolutely. So if you're on the East Coast, that 09:01 UTC translates to a pretty early 3:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
EDT. Okay.
Right. Central Time Zone, folks, you're looking at 2:01 a.m. Central Daylight Time. Mountain Time, it's 1:01 a.m. MDT. And for the Pacific Coast, it hits at 12:01 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time.
Wow, that's early for a lot of us. What about our listeners in Alaska and Hawaii? Are they going to be experiencing this on a different date, technically?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Because of the time difference, they actually will. For Alaska, the equinox rolls in at 11:01 p.m. Alaska Daylight Time on Wednesday, March 19th, so just before midnight.
Uh-oh.
And over in Hawaii, it's 9:01 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, also on Wednesday the 19th.
Okay, so depending on where you are, it might actually be like officially the day before for some people. And, the article mentions that the March equinox, it kind of has this range of dates it can fall on, right?
It does. Carter points out that it's not stuck to just March 20th every year. It can actually happen anytime between March 19th and 21st.
Interesting.
So even though it's on the 20th in 2025, it's good to keep in mind it can, shift around a little from year to year.
Good to know. All right, so we've nailed down the timing. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is the spring equinox? Like, we hear that phrase tossed around, but what's the real astronomical lowdown?
Well, the word equinox itself actually comes from Latin. Equa means equal, and nox means night. And that's really the heart of it, right? It's one of those two special days a year where everywhere on Earth gets roughly the same amount of daylight and darkness, roughly 12 hours of each.
Equal day and night all across the globe. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So what makes this global balancing act happen?
It all comes down to the sun's position relative to our planet. So at the exact moment of the equinox, the sun is directly over Earth's equator at midday. And, if you picture Earth as this spinning globe orbiting the sun, it's not perfectly upright, right? It's tilted on its axis by about 23.4 degrees.
Right, that axial tilt.
Exactly. And that tilt is the big reason we have seasons in the first place.
Okay.
As Earth goes around the sun throughout the year, different parts of it are tilted either towards or away from the sun, which changes how much direct sunlight they get, and that's what gives us our seasons.
Gotcha. So the equinox is like that moment when the tilt isn't really favoring either hemisphere, right? It's like neutral.
Exactly. During the equinox, Earth's tilt isn't leaning significantly towards or away from the sun for either hemisphere. It's like this brief pause, a balancing point in our planet's yearly trip around the sun.
I like that, a balancing point. Yeah. And that balancing act has like opposite effects depending on which hemisphere you're in, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Carter points this out too. For us up here in the Northern Hemisphere, the spring equinox is the official start of spring, astronomically speaking. It's when we start getting more daylight hours than darkness. And that leads to the warming up we think of with springtime. But in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the opposite. The March equinox kicks off their autumn. They're starting to tilt away from the sun, so their days are getting shorter.
So while we're all excited for those longer days, folks down south are gearing up for cozy nights by the fire.
Pretty much.
It's all about perspective, right? Now, Carter also talked about how equinoxes are related to solstices. Could you give us a quick rundown on the difference between those two?
Yeah, sure. So with equinoxes, the sun's path crosses this imaginary line in the sky called the celestial equator. It's like if you took Earth's equator and projected it out onto the big dome of the sky.
Right.
But solstices, they mark the points where Earth's axis is pointed either the most towards or the most away from the sun. And that's what causes those longest and shortest days of the year, one for each hemisphere. So equinoxes are all about equal day and night, and solstices are those extreme daylight situations.
That makes it crystal clear. So what about the other solstices and the other equinox for 2025? Did the article mention when those are?
Yeah, it did. So after the spring equinox we're talking about, the next big event is going to be the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. That's around Friday, June 20th. Then we've got the September equinox, also called the autumnal equinox, around Monday, September 22nd. And finally, the December or winter solstice on Sunday, December 21st. So those are like the main markers between our seasons.
So we've got the when and the why of the spring equinox pretty much nailed down.
Yeah.
Now, Carter brings up this really fascinating point about the northern lights being more common around the equinox. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, this is where things get really cool. It's mainly due to something called the Russell-McPherson effect.
Okay, the Russell-McPherson effect.
It's a mouthful.
It is.
But basically what Carter explains is during the equinoxes, the way Earth's axis is positioned sideways to the sun, it creates this kind of alignment between Earth's magnetic field and the solar wind.
Okay, and the solar wind, that's that stream of charged particles coming from the sun, right?
Exactly. And Earth's magnetic field is like the shield around us. It deflects most of those particles. But during the equinox, the shape of that interaction kind of changes. And for a while, it actually lets more of those solar wind particles through. They funnel down toward the poles.
It's like a temporary opening in our shield or a more direct path or something.
You could think of it like that, yeah. The angle's just more favorable for those charged particles to get through and interact with the gases in our upper atmosphere, especially near the north and south poles. And those interactions, that's what causes the northern lights, or aurora borealis, and the southern lights, or aurora australis.
Wow.
So around the equinox, those light shows can happen more often and be even more intense.
That is so cool. And Carter also mentioned that the current level of solar activity is boosting this effect too, right?
Absolutely. The sun goes through this cycle of activity that lasts about 11 years, and it affects how many sunspots and solar flares it makes. We're in a pretty active period right now, and actually the sun probably reached its peak activity, its solar maximum, back in October of last year.
Okay.
So there are more of these big bursts of energy from the sun, sending even more of those charged particles our way. And when that combines with this favorable magnetic field alignment during the equinox, well, it makes the chances of seeing some really amazing aurora displays even higher.
So anyone hoping to catch the northern lights this spring equinox in 2025 might be their chance. Right, so the equinox itself isn't like a big visual event in the sky the way a meteor shower is, but are there still ways we can actually observe it or, I don't know, appreciate it in a direct way?
Yeah, definitely. Carter makes a good point that it's not this sudden, dramatic thing you see, but there are these cool, subtle things happening that you can notice. The biggest one is that on the day of the equinox, the sun rises almost perfectly due east and sets almost perfectly due west everywhere on Earth.
Really?
Yeah, and that only happens on the two equinoxes. So if you can see the horizon clearly in the east and west, check out where the sun is when it rises and sets on March 20th.
It's like a way to connect with the Earth's movement and where we are on it, you know?
Exactly.
Oh, and didn't the article say something about how fast the sunrise and sunset happen around this time?
It did. Earth Sky, which Carter mentioned, says that the fastest sunrises and sunsets we see all year happen around the equinoxes. It has to do with the angle we're seeing the sun's path from relative to the horizon. Because of that angle, the sun looks like it's moving across the horizon faster during sunrise and sunset around the equinoxes than at other times.
That's wild. So
Yeah.
it's really fleeting. What about stargazing tips? Anything specific for the Northern Hemisphere around the spring equinox?
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're out under the stars after dark around that time, look for the Big Dipper in the north. It's going to be pretty high up in the sky during the spring months. There's even a saying stargazers use, spring up, fall down.
Okay.
This means the Big Dipper's high in the spring and lower in the fall. It's a good one to remember.
Awesome. All right, so let's recap everything we've learned. The 2025 spring equinox is on Thursday, March 20th at 09:01 UTC. For us in North America, that's really early morning or late evening, depending on your time zone. Astronomically, it means near equal day and night because the sun's directly over the equator, all thanks to that tilt of our planet. We've also got an increased chance of seeing the northern lights then because Earth's magnetic field and the superactive solar wind are kind of lining up in a special way. And while the equinox itself isn't like a fireworks show in the sky, you can watch the sun rise due east and set due west on that day, and those sunrises and sunsets are going to happen super fast. Plus, for our Northern Hemisphere stargazers, the Big Dipper is going to be shining bright up high.
You got it. We covered all the major points of the 2025 spring equinox, all thanks to Jamie Carter's awesome reporting. So hopefully everyone's feeling like they've got a good handle on this seasonal shift now.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. This whole spring equinox thing, with its promise of balanced light and that feeling of springtime renewal, it's really tied into these huge ongoing cycles of energy and light that shape our planet and how we experience time. It's pretty deep when you think about it.
Yeah.
So maybe on March 20th, take a minute to really watch the sunrise or sunset and think about all those incredible things happening in space that are bringing us from winter into spring. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have the ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I